More than 6 million people in Europe are affected by a heart rhythm disorder called atrial fibrillation, or AF, but many do not realize it. People with AF are 5 times more likely to have a stroke compared to the general population. Many of these strokes can be prevented. Many thousands of people around the world are supporting a campaign called Sign Against Stroke in Atrial Fibrillation, which is focused on the implementation of the Global AF Patient Charter and asks national governments to act to address public education, earlier diagnosis, and to improve management to prevent strokes in people with atrial fibrillation.
Atrial fibrillation, or AF, is a heart rhythm disorder. It's the most common heart rhythm disorder across the world and affects over 6 million people across Europe, costing the European economy over 38 billion euros every year.
Unlike blood pressure or diabetes, not many European citizens have ever heard about atrial fibrillation. Unfortunately, atrial fibrillation can increase the risk of stroke by 500%.
Atrial fibrillation is a major risk factor for stroke because it results in the heart beating abnormally. This encourages turbulent blood flow, allowing clots to form where the flow is slow or stagnant. If some or all of a clot then travels from the heart to the brain, it can result in a stroke. Because clots arising from atrial fibrillation can be quite large, the resulting stroke is often very serious or even fatal.
Simply knowing your pulse can alert you to an irregular heart rhythm, which could be atrial fibrillation.
The best way of tackling atrial fibrillation is early diagnosis. And not only does it save lives, I mean, there's benefit to individuals, but there's a huge benefit to healthcare systems in different countries. So it really is in the interests of national governments that there are information campaigns out there that will tell people of the early signs of atrial fibrillation.
Atrial fibrillation diagnosis is so crucial because too many people discover that problem only after they had a stroke, and that is too late.
As a medical doctor, I encourage my colleagues to implement the clinical guidelines widely accepted at the European level for atrial fibrillation and strokes caused by atrial fibrillation, especially those implemented by European Society of Cardiology.
Enhancing knowledge and practices in the healthcare workforces, I believe, will improve very heavily the fibrillation problem and AF-related strokes.
I think that's very important, that national governments throughout the 27 member states buy into this in terms of realising that apart from the human trauma as a result of strokes, that there's also a cost factor involved here.
Accessibility to the prevention and the care of these disorders should be made available to every European. And I therefore urge the national governments to come up with national priorities on this issue in order to avoid a lot of people suffering.
National governments should do their best to increase access to innovative technologies that are able to prevent, detect and treat AF and AF-related strokes.
Well, I believe that decision makers should look at the data available and the experience of the patient when making their decisions in relation to patient care.
The Global AF Patient Charter contains a lot of recommendations and critical steps in order to tackle the problem of atrial fibrillation and AF-related strokes.
The Global AF Patient Charter is designed to bring a unified voice so that everybody has a high awareness of what atrial fibrillation is and that we can better manage the long-term consequences of this disorder by means of this education.
To demonstrate your support for improving the lives of people with atrial fibrillation and preventing stroke, I invite you all to sign the Global AF Patient Charter.
Join members of the European Parliament in asking national governments to act to improve the prevention of AF-related strokes by going to signagainststroke.com. Click on Sign the Charter. Enter your full name, country and city of residence, tick the terms and conditions box, and submit. Thank you for supporting the Sign Against Stroke campaign.